brother did that. He did artistic personality. He was over in Ireland, childhood, and he did a lot of research. And he came back and said, we're really not related to anybody vain or substance. We're really related to thugs. We're related to, he said, our relatives, Scottish people that they basically were the people that we sent into the fight. Because they were expendable.
Yeah. These guys were the guys sitting off on that kill.
Yeah.
These talks.
Yeah.
Even now.
Life expectancy was low too. Life expectancy was low. So, all right, we're back. Are we ready? Do we have everybody, Scott? Are the board members back?
Guys, still voting for you. I want to just give me a second.
Okay.
Rebecca? Fabulous. Like, fabulous.
These people are just killing each other.
Very
For whatever
impressive.
little hold they have.
Well, here we go. We have everyone back. We
Okay.
got everyone. So we started 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 board members, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have a quorum.
Well, fantastic. Welcome everybody to our cooperative board meeting. And we're going to start off, we're going to call the meeting in order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. To the back of the room. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which
stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, fantastic. And before we go, let's do, Deb, would you do roll call? Would that be?
Yes, Mr. Boucher. If you would please say here after I call your name. Jay?
Here.
Mr. Stewart?
Here.
Mrs. Anderson?
Here.
Mrs. Corbin? I know she's not here. Mrs. Irvin?
Here.
Mrs. Stoppel's not here. Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Nelson?
Here.
Mr. Nicotera?
Here.
Dr. Pacelli?
Here.
Mr. Salerno? Okay, thank you. And I know Mrs. Corbin and Mrs. Salvo told me earlier that they would be absent today. Thank you, everyone.
I just want to point out, and it is a choice, but some board members may or may not be aware that their cameras are off in Zoom. So if you intended to have your camera on, please check it. If you intended to have it off, that is fine.
Okay, super. And before we go any further, I would like to recognize our newest board member, Heather Johnson from Westmoreland is here tonight joining us. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, we're going to move on to recognition. We don't have any other outside recognition, correct? That's correct, okay. And then we're going to move right to Deb Kimball can help us with the appointment of our new board member. Oh, I need a resolution, that's right. I need a resolution. Do we have one? I'm sorry.
You can read right off to your choose.
I'm going to read it out.
You can read resolution to appoint.
Okay, we need a motion for a resolution. Resolution to appoint a new board member. Notice is hereby given of a vacancy of the Board of Cooperative Educational Services to the members of the Board of Education, the component school district of Oneida-Herkimer-Madison, BOCES. The vacancy is created by the resignation of Mrs. Charlene A. Hartman, effective February 10th, 2021. Consistent with the amended provisions of the educational law, Section 1950, the Oneida-Herkimer-Madison BOCES will exercise its authority to fill the vacancy by appointment after consultation with the Board of Education of Westmoreland Central School. The Oneida-Herkimer-Madison BOCES intends to fill the vacancy by appointing Heather Johnson to fill the vacancy until the next election in April 2021 and pending election results for the remainder of the Charlene Hartman's term that expires June 30th, 2021. So we need a motion for that resolution.
Also moved.
by Mr. Salerno, second by Mr. Moore. And all in discussion?
I would just like to say welcome. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yep, we can, Michelle.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Super. And there's a discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So now we need to go ahead with the oath of office administered by Mrs. Kimball.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
That I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of the Board member
the duties of the office of a cooperative board member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Very much. Please sign your oath for me. Welcome. Congratulations.
Fantastic. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so now we'll move on to communications from the floor. I see none. Do we have any other correspondence, Dr. Kilburn, from the,
No correspondence at this time.
no correspondence? No from the floor. Okay, so we're going to move right on to the district superintendent's report, which has the organizational goals and the future of BOCES programming update. Dr. Kilburn.
So what I'd like to do first and foremost is ask Scott Morris to share a screen of emails I've gotten. And Scott, if we could begin with the vision and mission screen. Two board members who are in the room, I'm asking you to just pull out your fabulous BOCES vision, mission motto that you adopted earlier this year. Oh, here it is. Now, we'll wait for Scott to pull that up on the screen share. There we go. Okay, so the vision and mission and motto, the vision, the mission, the motto, I feel like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Were adopted earlier this year. So Heather, this is a great opportunity for you to see it for the first time. But what we're trying to do is narrow down from a larger statement about who we are and what we're about and what we're trying to achieve into organizational direction. So the role of the board is to set the tenor and tone of the organization, but also to chart the course. So if we were a boat, the Board of Education would be saying, off to Hawaii, hopefully, right? That's because that's where I would like to go. So if we look here, we can see that we have this vision to strive to provide innovative leadership programs and services in response to the emerging needs of our school districts and learners. And when you go to the mission, how are we doing it? Well, we're collaborators. And we work together and we partner with leaders in education, in business, in industry, in government, and the local community. And we do this to promote inclusive educational and career opportunities, equitable access, in order to prepare all of our learners for the dynamic world of today and tomorrow. So that's really about how we get the work done. And as BOCES, we're a cooperative. So we're a bit like a school district, but we're also a bit like a not-for-profit and a bit like a business in terms of how we're organized. So we have to think kind of in different modes and different ways of approaching our work in a BOCES. So you can see our mission is really about our how. Then we have this fabulous motto, we are better together, we are OHM BOCES, which I always feel like we should be like, woohoo, because I love our motto. So as the board worked really hard at the end of last year and the beginning of this year to shape our vision and our mission and our motto, we're now going to look for how are we going to find some direction out of this, because there's a lot there. How are we going to measure that? And where are we going to go? So now we have to get on the boat and chart the course. So I'd like to take the board now to another idea, and don't bring it up yet on the screen, Scott, and it's the idea of priorities. So we've talked about organizational goals. But before we get to those, I want to first talk about the idea of priorities, organizational priorities. Oftentimes, when you're in a diverse organization, like a school district, or in this case, a BOCES, which is incredibly diverse, there's a temptation to try to draft organizational goals that are comprehensive. We feel like we have to describe everything we do and write this broad goal so everyone in the organization can work for that goal, right? So we have to make sure we incorporate emerging technologies, because then the technology people have to be able to write goals, and we want to make sure we have instructional goals, and we want to make sure we have service goals. So we can often end up with these very broad statements, but they describe everything we do, but don't necessarily take us in a direction. And if we think of priorities, priorities provide an opportunity to move an organization forward. So I'm going to give an example of what I'm talking about before we move to the next section. Here's an example of a priority. If I owned a restaurant and I was looking for, let's say, improvement or new opportunities, I might notice that I had an increasing customer base who had food allergies. Maybe they can't order food off my menu, or maybe they're asking for more options. So I might see that as an improvement, or I might see it as an opportunity, or I might see it as both. Well, I might develop organizational priorities focusing on understanding food allergens, food health and safety practices within the kitchens based on allergens, maybe diversifying the menu and looking at cooking practices around food allergens. Now, the truth is, I'm still the same restaurant. I still have the same staff. I still have the same equipment. I'm still offering the same menu. I may offer different or more choices. So I'm not changing what my organization is all about. I'm still about providing high quality food to as many people as I can. But I am prioritizing food allergens. And for the next 3 years, that's going to be my priority focus. So I can move my restaurant in a direction to address an improvement or a new opportunity. I'm not losing what I do, but I'm leaning on a certain part of my work to create some movement forward. In school systems, we might see that around a goal or a priority of literacy. So a Board of Education might look and say, in our district, we're recognizing that 60% of our students are reading at least 2 grade levels behind. So we as a board want to prioritize literacy throughout the organization. So they set a literacy priority. Now, for the algebra teacher, it doesn't mean that I stop teaching algebra. I'm still teaching algebra. I still have my APPR. I'm still preparing students for a Regents exam. I'm still writing my math lesson plans. I'm still doing the business of teaching algebra. But I will be writing a SMART goal that addresses the priority. So I'm still doing all of my job, but I'm going to now lean on literacy. So I might have a SMART goal that I've written that focuses on reading across the content areas within my algebra curriculum. And that goal is going to get reported right up to the board. So the board is going to start to see how literacy is taking shape and moving forward in the organization. The school still does everything a school does, but the board is kind of choosing to, like, if you're in a boat, like drop one sail to move the boat in a certain direction. So now what I'd like to do is, if you're in the room, you have this beautiful document. It's got these yellow blocks of color with these enormous hands, many hands. And Scott's going to put that on the screen. So within our organization in the Senior Council, we took a look at where we left off from our last board retreat. And during our last board retreat, we left off with 3 concepts about our BOCES. In the left-hand column, and it's the one with the single hand reaching out, at the top of the box it says BOCES is a helping hand. That was a majority thought that our board had in the retreat. The second central box says BOCES is a central connector. And the third box was about BOCES exemplifying equity and access. And we were charged as a senior council with going back and trying to think about how could these become organizational goals. Now, the idea is that we have these organizational goals, although I think we might want to talk about organizational priorities. And the board would establish the priorities and charge everyone with establishing the SMART goals that they're going to be measuring each year that link directly to those priorities. And over a 3-year period, the board is going to receive reports on every department, including its own board. The board will have its own SMART goals, and myself will have SMART goals, regarding the priorities. So we can see how we're moving the organization's work according to the priorities. So in order to kind of get our heads around this at the senior council, this is what we did. If you look in the left-hand column where it says BOCES is a helping hand, underneath it, it says, how does OHM BOCES serve as a helping hand? We started coming up with ways we did it, and here's an example of 3 different bullets. So we provide innovative programs, services, supports, and resources to districts, and we do that so those districts are able to meet the needs of their students. We also encourage cost-sharing opportunities on behalf of the component districts so we can support their continued sustainability. And then the third, which you'll see is highlighted, is we do this by anticipating the needs of the component districts so that they may respond to the changing educational landscape. And you might recall from our retreat, that was the lighthouse conversation, where we have to be, BOCES is the lighthouse. So we highlighted that one because we would recommend to the board that though you can see there's a variety of ways that BOCES is a helping hand, and though we will continue doing everything that's up there, we think the place to lean, to measure and keep track of in the organization is the third one, that's yellow. If you look at the central column, AKA the central connector, see how we did that? We did the same thing. What does OHM BOCES serve? Oh, I should have said, how does it serve as a central connector? There's 2 different things. We facilitate and connect the districts. We do that to support their work locally and regionally so they can learn, problem solve, and innovate. We also gather the component districts in order to advocate, right, regarding the region's unique needs and perspectives with education, government, and leadership. When we looked at those 2, and though we would continue doing those 2, we felt the recommendation to the board is to prioritize on the first bullet. And if we look at the third, we asked, how does or should OHM BOCES address equity? So you can see there are 4 bullets. We provide programs and services to districts to increase their students' access to learning. We provide programs and services to students to increase their access to learning essential life skills, college and career opportunities. We provide instructional supports and resources to educators in order for them to address the unique needs of students. But we feel that we should lean here. We should infuse inclusive values throughout the entire OHM BOCES organization and within teaching and learning. So we chose an internal priority because we feel that as a BOCES, we should be exemplifying inclusivity, which encompasses equity in everything we do, because we represent the needs of districts who can't access or gain equity through their own resources. We represent students who have disabilities. We represent students who aren't achieving the greatest success in their own districts and they need additional supports and services to graduate and achieve success. And we also have access to career opportunities. So we really feel that when we look at what we do as a BOCES, we really need to be rooted in the values of inclusivity. So we felt this is where we should lean. Now I'd like to open this up for discussion to the board, but before we do that briefly, we thought it was also a good idea to talk about what we mean by inclusivity. So I'm going to have Scott just pull up another piece of paper and we will return to this. And if you're in the room, you have one that looks like this. It's like a beautiful blue piece of paper. There we go. So this is what we mean by inclusivity. And we felt that if the board supports leaning in this priority, we were really going to have to work with all of our supervisors to understand what we mean by inclusivity so that they would be able to create their SMART goals in inclusivity. We had some dialogue about that. So for example, some members of departments, some departments might choose to lean on one inclusivity value over another. So we looked at everyone is ready as an inclusivity value, which is at the bottom of the screen that Scott is sharing. And we had a conversation, for example, about IT. So information technology found themselves in the position of equipping hundreds of children with Chromebooks so that they could learn from their homes. By working under the assumption that everybody was ready, we recognized that we had to diversify what support meant for students and families in their homes, because we recognized that some students and families had access to technology and may already know how to use it to connect online and access programs they might have already been learning in an online platform. So the level of support they would need was very different from families who may not have had internet access, device technology, may be unfamiliar with the learning platform, may not know how to connect to a wireless access point. So if we looked at that value of everyone is ready, and let's say I'm in the information technology division and maybe I'm in charge of supplying those supports, I might write a SMART goal from that perspective of everyone is ready. Another department might write a perspective from a different value in inclusion. But when we can break it down to this discrete level, we feel that our supervisors will have a better ability to write SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals that line into the inclusion priority. So what I'd like to do now is go back to this one, Scott, back to the handy document, hands. And what we're asking from the board is if you would have some discussion, if the board is on the same page regarding, if there's consensus regarding those different priorities, then what we would do is next share them with the superintendents tomorrow, have some dialogue. If the consensus lines up there, then we would shape those priorities into like a finished sentence for each. And then we could start working with our supervisors. We would host a session for our supervisors to learn about the priorities, the values of inclusivity, understanding how to develop SMART goals, and we can start charging the organization with working on their goals, including the board. The board would have work to do on their goals. So I now open the floor up to the board, and Mike Moore has his hand raised.
Sure, thank you. I had a few thoughts while you were talking. Can you hear me? First of all, can you hear me well?
I can, Mike.
Okay. When you were talking initially about values and goals, the thought occurred to me that it's important to be to think about the difference between treating a symptom and developing a plan to meet a goal. I'm a little concerned that it's easy to drift off treating symptoms. I'm not saying I've seen evidence of that, but that is a tendency for organizations. And when you're treating just symptoms, you hop from symptom to symptom, and you may not make any progress on anything. Now, I looked at a couple of things you're doing. You talked about SMART goals, and I think maybe that's a focus on trying to look at a symptom and figure out how you're going to be effective on that. You may not actually treat the symptom, you may treat something else. Equity, for example, equity of access. You mentioned a few things which seem to make sense. People having the ability to use their computers that we give them. But there might be other problems too. There might just be problems with having power in the house, access to that, or too much noise in the house, or possibly a language thing. I'm not saying I've got solutions to these. I just want to put the focus on the idea that we do have to approach this in a smarter way than just placing a goal on a symptom and then proceeding. We have to be a little bit more
Correct.
yeah, better than that. Okay, I'll be quiet now. I'm sorry.
No, please don't be, because I think you're bringing up something really neat. I want to clarify to make sure I'm understanding. So I gave two examples. I gave the example of a restaurant owner seeing an opportunity or a potential improvement within food allergens. And I also gave an example of a district who might be analyzing and realizing they need to make improvements in literacy. And I think that goes with your thought about the organization's direction versus treating symptoms. Am I correct in that analogy, in that understanding? Meaning that looking at food allergens and looking at reading would be symptoms.
You have an organization should take a look at who they're servicing and say, what ultimately do we want to do to call it a success? I think in this case, things like we have good outcomes with the students. That's ultimately what we want. And to make those good outcomes, we need things like equal access. We need literacy. But to focus in on literacy, that might, I'm not saying it is, but that might be a symptom. And the approach to solving it might be finding out, why do we suddenly see a drop in literacy? It may not be the productive thing to get all the students together for focus groups to read more. There might be something else that has to happen to prevent the problem of literacy. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Okay, I think I understand. So a thing to be concerned about, and I want to see if I'm reframing this to capture your meaning correctly, Mike. A concern about using priorities versus the larger, broader statements is that it means that you could be moving in a direction without necessarily understanding why we're going there and if we're getting to the right place for the right reasons, because we could be addressing a symptom without understanding everything that goes underneath it. Or we could be going after something we think should be chased after, but is it grounded within the work and the ultimate goal of what we're trying to achieve? I think, Mike, that's kind of if I were to sum up what your intent is, am I capturing the intent correctly? And I don't know if you can hear me, Mike. Have I captured that correctly? Because I want to make sure we have understanding of that.
I'm sorry. I had an interruption in the meeting, and I missed the whole last 2 minutes. I apologize.
Okay, so I was just kind of summarizing what I felt that I think you're trying to express, which is when we use priorities versus the larger comprehensive statements, we could be moving the district in a direction or the BOCES in a direction without necessarily comprehensively addressing the root cause, and or we could be moving in a direction that we feel is the right way to go, but is it meeting the intent and purpose of the organization itself? For example, you had talked about the student outcomes and trying to achieve the good things for students being a purpose of our organization. Do you feel that I'm capturing your intent?
I think in general, yes, but I want to focus in on treating a symptom may not be a pathway to progress.
Okay, correct. Okay, so I think that's perfect.
The most fundamental thing.
That's wonderful. So that's a great point of reflection, and I'm glad we were able to capture it, because I had the same kind of thinking about, we have to make sure we're moving forward. We have to have a direction to move. And how do we know that what we're thinking to lean on is the right way to lean? One way to balance it, it's not the only way to determine if it's right or not, is to look at the mission and the vision and the motto. So when we go back to that piece of paper where we reflect on our vision and our mission, our purpose, and how we get there, we at the Senior Council did look through this and feel that it does align well. All of the bullets up there really all do with our fundamental purpose and what we're trying to achieve in terms of the organization's outcomes. However, I think your point has some merit for further reflection. I like the way that you talked about symptoms, to be very thoughtful about the steps that we take. Do we have any other thoughts?
No, I'll be quiet. I think I understood what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Okay. First off, I agree with the three central components here of what we decided in our last meeting. You know, you reworded this and given it obviously a great deal of thought. I'm sure you've worked internally, and I'm also quite sure you know a whole lot more about education than we do. But I just wanted to focus on the middle ones, central connecting. You know, my thought, at least, when we were talking about this, my thought about this was that we would use BOCES as to help coordination of all social service efforts from birth to death, that to coordinate with other government agencies, other support agencies, to, you know, make sure that we are coordinated when a child arrives at school, that they're prepared for school, that when they leave school, they're prepared for the rest of their life. And there's an awful lot of social agencies that are involved in doing that. And, you know, the main focus was going to be to coordinate with all of them. And that to me would be focusing more on your second one. You know, and not even kind of worded the same way, but.
Yeah, I think that's third. I hear that as something entirely different than the two. I like it. So I've written down, just to capture Gary's thoughts, BOCES helps with the coordination of all social service efforts for children from birth, you had said, to death.
Well,
I'm not sure about death. But then I had written down something along the lines, from arrival into life through life preparedness, or something like that, right? That idea of we are helping to support children from when they come into the world through life preparation. So I wonder, it's funny because Tom's going to be talking about a COSER that we're going to be proposing to the superintendents tomorrow that does just that. So I have a question. Is that us doing that, or is that what the districts do? And do we support them in doing that work? That's what I don't know.
We support the districts in coordinating with all the other agencies that are involved in doing this. So we, you know, we're kind of the central hub of all of these services.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least so they're lined up. You know, they're all going to remain independent, but their efforts should be coordinated. And at the moment, I don't think they really are, you know.
They're not. So that's part of so that kind of goes to the alignment conversation that was here before I came.
Yeah.
That idea of the BOCES being that central hub to help coordinate. And I apologize, I keep looking this way and I have people over here. The idea of BOCES being that central hub so that schools can have a place to go where they can in turn receive supports to children through multiple access points, right? Like, but it's coordinated for them through the BOCES. It's ironic because we're actually...
Probably aligned is the better word, aligned.
And we are actually working, we are doing that work right now. And across, we're going to talk about a little bit of it tonight. We're having a meeting with superintendents tomorrow that might lead to something else in that same vein. So I'm just going to ask senior counsel, do we see that as, because I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm wondering, is that, I think because I've already got it kind of in my mind as a service, I'm seeing it as a service versus something bigger, or is it something bigger? I could use some input around that idea because I like it.
Well, I'm sorry.
I have a word or two on that. I don't know if this is practical, but the thought is that we, instead of trying to act as a coordinator, instead we try to figure out how we can present an interface to other agencies so that they know what levers and buttons they can push on us and what effect they'll have. And likewise, coordinate with them to present interfaces like that to us so that we have an interagency language, if you would, so that we can apply each other's capabilities efficient ways. I would assume right now that it is a problem of discovery of what an agency can do and how to make it do it. So to summarize, if we had a set of rules for each agency about how we interact, it might facilitate things.
Okay, I'm trying to capture these. So if I'm quiet, I want people to know that I'm just trying to capture Gary's thoughts with Mike's thoughts. Just give me just 1 second to process this. Mention BOCES connects and communicates with regional agencies, schools.
I was under the impression that a lot of this was already taking place. I mean, I think there's some efforts already.
Yes, and I think that's why we're trying to determine, are we looking at the priority, which I think it could very well be, as I'm trying to decipher it from a service that we're already trying to put in place that does all of this. Because if it's a service that does all of it, then you can just measure the one service. Then I don't know if it's an organizational priority, right? So I was hoping Chris could give some insight into that.
If I could comment too.
Yep.
You know, this reminds me, this could be a valuable service to all the districts because, and you're already doing it, but I mean, to provide it in this manner, it reminds me of what happens at the county level. I just was in some meetings in the last several months about different towns around the county trying to get their own solar systems and their own power systems in. And each town is learning about it from the beginning and negotiating. So what we try to do is have them go through a central clearinghouse, which is Mohawk Valley Edge out in Rome. And they have learned all the different intricacies so they can help the towns. And I see this being much like this, with each district's going to come to you with different needs at different times. Instead of having to reinvent the wheel, you could be really a great aid in clearinghouse to help, because usually when they come to you with a need, it's already too late. So, time is of the essence. So this is valuable. My 2 cents.
May I chime in with something, please?
Yes, please.
First of all, with respect to the clearinghouse and concept that I believe Mr. Nelson and Mr. Boucher were talking about, I do recall sometime back the board got involved in something, and the concept of 411 goes through my mind. I think we as a board talked about that, and you could dial 411 and say, who do I turn to for help here? So I think that's someplace in our past DNA, and perhaps we could take a look at that. The other thing, with reference to my friend Mr. Moore, I think he makes an excellent point, and it seems to me that to mitigate the concern he raised regarding a symptomatic approach, it seems to me that one of the places we need to look at post-action is, well, Dr. Kilburn, you made the reference to the restaurant and what you were seeing from your customers. Our customers are the kids as well. And I think we need to develop a tool which will allow us to communicate with our graduates and find out how well we service them with respect to the goals or SMART goals that we're talking about. How well did we do this for you? How well did we do that? Now that you're out of our environment and out into the workplace and the world. Thank you.
I like the idea. So if we were to come together on some priorities, to better understand how effective we may already be or not be, one way might be to reach out to alumni and get their feedback regarding how successful we were at meeting those priorities. Am I getting that correct, Gary?
I believe that gets to the point I was trying to make, yes.
Wonderful. Just to make sure I am capturing the discussion Mike Moore, Gary Nelson, and Steve Boucher opened up, I'm trying to flesh out some verbiage. OHM BOCES connects and communicates with regional agencies, schools, and organizations to provide an array of services for students to engage them in education from life through school and into their successful, I don't want to get to death, really. Gary, I'm trying to avoid death. I just don't think it looks great on paper. Just saying. But I think I'm capturing the intent. And when we have the word communicate in there, I'm putting that specifically in there, Mike, to your point about we are connecting and communicating so that it's not only just making the connections, but it's establishing the communication parameters or ways that people can access the organizations between agencies for that point. Okay, any other thoughts about this? Mr. Morris, or you have someone on, Russ Stewart. Russ, hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Russ, can you hear me? Oh, yeah.
I think Michelle had her hand up before mine.
I apologize, I can't see.
That's okay. Just really quick, I won't take up too much time. Mike, I don't know if you're aware, but we're always looking at your forehead moving. I'm not sure if your camera, it makes me a little, you don't have to turn off your camera. I don't know if you're aware that we're looking at the
I'm just so glad that I wasn't doing anything really personal. I didn't realize that was on.
I would like someone to tell me that if I were doing that also.
Well, thank you.
Number two, is there a chance I could get just someone email me these documents, or did I miss that they were sent to us ahead of time?
No, we're presenting them tonight. That's why we're having the screen share. And yes, I'm happy to email all of this to the board.
Okay.
So you can continue to dig into this without any issues. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
All right. So Russ Stewart, you have your hand up.
Yes. I think anticipating the needs of the component districts is each district right now, if we looked at each and every one of them, they're unique in their own ways, and their symptoms, Michael, are going to be different. There are a few of our schools who are basically in the financially the same place, and extremely struggling and looking for to play a major role in our kids, our students, meet the global market. And I'm not sure how to do that. Financially, I mean, we're doing our budgets, and right now I have 5 positions. So we have 5 positions that are going to most likely be cut in this budget year. So I'm trying to look at the global end and those symptoms, Michael, that are in our district. And I can't help but, and I know I'm wordy here, but I can't help but going back to 2009 and looking at that financial situation and what it did to our districts and what it did in cutting staff, that BOCES needs to play a much different role in the future than it plays now. As far as BOCES going to districts and students to contiguous districts making hubs. And Michael, I know you don't like the word regionalizing, and I particularly don't care what word you use, but I know as a small district, we need help with that. And I don't think the New Hartfords are there yet. Maybe they are, and maybe the Whitesville. But they're I think in better financial situation than we are. And Tony, you know, I'm not sure where Sequoia is at this point, you know, because we're pretty similar in student population and finances. And I'll let you speak on that. But so that's, you know, I'm looking for BOCES teachers to come to local school districts, teaching a class with, you know, Waterville students and Brookfield students in it, and try to get aid back on that to meet some of the needs. So, and I agree with Gary Nelson in regards to the alignment. I think the biggest point there is that the communities are competing against one another for our students, and the conversations I've had with them, they need to stop doing that. They need to get organized and to specialize in areas that we could use. And I think that's what Connected Community Schools is doing. Is exactly that. I threw a lot out there. I'm going to mute and see if it has any replay here.
So Russ, I had a hard time. I missed the last sentence you just said. It got kind of cut out. I just want to make sure I'm summarizing correctly for understanding. So when you looked at the first column, the left-hand column, and where it says anticipating the needs of the component districts, I'm thinking that you're recognizing the need for BOCES to prioritize there for the districts because of what we're all facing and where the different districts are in terms of their position and what they'll need in the future. And you talked about connected community schools, and I wasn't sure if it was in relationship to the conversation, I think it was, that Gary Nelson and Mike Moore and Steve Boucher brought up about this concept of this alignment with outside agencies. Were those the points you were making?
Yes, but the outside agencies have a lot of work to do to organize themselves and to specialize in areas and not to compete so much against one another that it drives the prices crazy.
Correct. So there might be an opportunity if we looked at that central connector from we're going to call it the Gary Nelson point of view without death. If we looked at it from that perspective, there's an opportunity for BOCES to engage with the agencies, establish two-way communication that works, but maybe through the long-term development of those relationships, the agencies might stop in redundancies, right? So they might all stop trying to provide the same thing, which would then allow them to specialize, and then districts could take advantage of that without costs becoming competitive.
Yes.
I think okay. So we're going to go to, I think, Tony Nicotera next. Tony?
Thank you, Dr. Kilborn. I'd like to follow up with what Russ just presented. And from a perspective of a sitting board member on a local district, we see BOCES as a continuation of our services, of our program. And BOCES fills the need that we cannot fill for our students and for our course offerings and for our program. So I agree with everything that's been presented, but I think a little bit more focus should be placed on the continuation of the local program. When a student transitions, say, to an occupational program, a career tech program, they shouldn't be leaving the Sequoia district and go to another district at BOCES. It should be a continuation of our program there to provide the services that we can't afford to provide locally at Sequoia Valley. So that's how I see it. I just think all the points made are accurate, but if we can put a little bit more focus on from the eyes of the local community and the smaller district, as Russ mentioned, we need to lean on someone. We need for someone to be there to support our programs because it's inevitable that we can't do it. And we just need to make that marriage a little bit better, I think. That's all.
So if I were looking at that first column, Tony, if I'm looking
Yes.
at the column about OHM BOCES serves as a helping hand, I want to make sure what I'm understanding is, are you thinking that we keep the priority on the emerging needs and add language to it, or are you thinking that the priority might better be served on bullet number 2, which is by curating cost-sharing opportunities on behalf of the component districts to support their continued sustainability?
It's almost a combination of both. I agree with you. I'm not sure what that answer is. I think
Okay.
I like number 2. I like the connection and the support locally. But I'm not sure, Dr. Coburn. I'm not sure on what the proper wording would be, but conceptually, I think you understand what I'm saying.
So I'm wondering about this. Let's look at that last sentence in the third bullet. By anticipating the needs of the component districts, so they may respond to the changing educational landscape and continue or providing programs that meet their need. You know what I mean? Like, so they need to emerge, they need to respond to the changing landscape, but they need to do it from their unique perspectives, which speaks to Russ's point that what districts are going to need is going to be different because they're all in different positions. So I wonder if there's a way to put local language in that third bullet. So like Sequoia Valley needs us to respond to their needs, right? Because they might not have money or they might need a new resource or a new program, but they want to know that we're trying to meet it from their perspective, that we're not just trying to say, this is the new organization BOCES built, now you have to send their kids there. They want to see that we're trying to customize it, choose the best we can to adapt to what Sequoia needs. Am I getting that right, Tom?
I agree with you. Yes. And let me see if I can give you this example. When I was working at Remsen, I would, if a student attended the career tech program in the afternoon, and let's say they were involved with cosmetology or they were involved with veterinary science, and they would always say, well, I'm only a Remsen student in the morning. I go to BOCES in the afternoon. I never accepted that. I felt that they were a Remsen student all day, but they took their 3 or 4 academic courses in the morning session at Remsen. The continuation of their Remsen program was in veterinary science at BOCES in the afternoon, but it was a conjunction of it was a collaboration of both programs. They weren't 2 distinct, different programs.
Yep, I'm getting what you're saying. So I'm trying to see, I keep looking at Ann Turner meaningfully, like, Ann, read my mind and come up with some verb. So if you can't see this, there's a whole other side of people over here on the opposite side of the room, and I'm giving them all looks to say, help me with verbiage. But I'm thinking something that says like, may respond to the changing educational landscape and continue to meet the unique, meet their students' needs. You know, so we emphasize that it's their students and their needs.
So I just, does anybody have their hands up? I can't tell.
No, Russ, I think you're the only one with their hand up.
Okay.
Go, Russ.
I just want to make sure that, you know, as I see the big picture, that the role of both and their staffing also changes. You know, I only have a few kids who want to be in engineering. This is an example. I had our superintendent contact contiguous districts to see what kind of programs they were having in engineering. Okay, so, and some of them don't have them either because it's a very small number of students. So I would see the role of BOCES is trying to find a central location within those districts to bring a teacher out and to have those students, you know, only travel, you know, 6 or 7 miles to that other district, and BOCES teach engineering, whether it's engineering by design, project leadership, whatever it may be. So I see the role of BOCES changing if it's going to meet the needs of those smaller local districts. And I just want to make sure that's understood in the way I see the picture. I also want to talk about CTE, and I'm going to go back to Michael's conversations about symptoms. And when I attend the committees and I have a union members in the room talking about not being able to find workers within their trades, sends a loud message to BOCES within the trades. And that's a symptom, and somewhere that needs to be addressed. And what also needs to be addressed is, CTE starting in the 11th and 12th grade is probably a hindrance in getting kids involved. And why we can't do it earlier, and I understand it, but some of that needs to be addressed. Maybe in not, but I hear it everywhere I go, that
Yep.
you can't find plumbers, you can't find contractors. I mean, we just open up our bids and we're hitting that already. So I'll stop there.
No, I think so through this dialogue, it's helping me kind of like look at these and find more shaping. So Dr. Porcelli, I'm going to come right to you for a minute. What I want to do is just try.
I appreciate that. Just a comment from what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm just not hearing it correctly. My friend Mr. Stewart seems to be talking about regionalization. Forgive the word, Mike. Regionalization. My friend Mr. Nicotera seems to be talking about localization. And I would just like to offer that I think the problem is a little bit more granular than what we're trying to dance around. Thank you.
Well, continue with that. So how do you see it, Gary?
Yeah.
Well, I tend to agree with you, Russ, in terms of I think we need to be more regionalized. However, that has been the battle we've been fighting at least since I've been on the board, and probably since you've been on the board. We can't get the local districts to agree to even a common bell schedule. I don't know how we can get into a degree of cooperativeness that brings about the issues that you're advocating.
Well, that's a very true statement. Yeah. It's no doubt a battle uphill, Gary.
But here's a thought. Maybe BOCES is nimble enough to do both. Maybe we can meet both masters. Maybe we can do what Tony Nicotera wants us to do. But in the instances where there's superintendents that have a need, suppose that Holland-Panton and Remsen get together and say, boy, we don't have enough students or enough money to do X, but together we do. So we hire a BOCES teacher. We put them in the shop in Holland-Panton and send the kids from Remsen over to Holland-Panton. They have a shorter, so you do a hybrid of what Russ is talking about. At the same time, you still can operate like we always have and do what Tony wants to do. So, I mean, maybe there's an opportunity here not to do an either or us. Not that I'm saying anyone's saying that, but I think we're nimble enough that perhaps we could provide some of those directions. And I think I think once the districts understand there's some options, maybe if a Riskin and a Westmoreland knew they could share a resource and BOCES could foot the bill but the BOCES get help with that cost, which is really a big plus, right? And you put the BOCES employee in one of the schools or the other, and it could be a job sharing opportunity. Just a thought.
Well, Steve, let me just insert. Pardon me for interrupting. Steve, you make a point, but listen to the language that my friend Mr. Nicotera used. Okay, you're talking about a hybrid example where BOCES provides. My friend Mr. Nicotera says, oh, when the kid goes to CTE in the afternoon, the kid says, I'm a BOCES student, but the district says, no, you're still a Remsen student. there's an underpinning of granularity here that I think is what brings about the downfall.
So I want to speak to this because I've lived it. So in the BOCES that I came from, we did actually set up regional schools, and we did it under the PTEC umbrella. And those children attended those schools from 9 through 12. And so I would tell you that in those cases, they didn't really consider themselves still to be Remsen students, right? To use this example. It started that way. We tried to promote that. And what happened was the kids wanted their own clubs. They wanted their own activities because they really were attending another high school full-time, grades 9 through 12. You have that here, so we see that in Alt Ed, and we also see that in PTEC. To what extent those children identify with their current districts, or they continue to, are they half-time at PTEC? They're full, right? F?
They're full-time here.
Yeah.
We have clubs and organizations here, but they do play sports and
Still for their
plays
homes.
and bands
Yep.
and all that stuff back in their district. So a little bit of both.
So, and which was what I experienced. So I do think, to Steve Boucher's point, it does already exist this way. Yet students who go to career and technical education do often still see themselves as a kid from their home district. So both of my daughters went through career and tech ed. And I remember when they would come back home, they were talking about their friend who's the Fonda kid, or their friend who was the, Amsterdam kid, while in this region. They really did. They all saw themselves as peers, but they recognized more the districts where they came from. I don't know that, I think this, if we look at that proposed priority, that we're going to do everything we currently do. So Tony, to the point we were talking about, we're still going to do bullet number 1. We're still going to provide innovative programs and services, supports, and resources to districts so they are able to meet the needs of their students. But if we lean on number 3, it allows us to start to get the lay of the land for what these districts are going to need in these years coming forward. And that may mean that there will be hub satellite programs. Now, I've done that, right? So in the BOCES I came out of, we had satellite PTEC. So there was a PTEC in the town of Johnstown, and there was one down in St. Johnsville, and there was another one in Gloversville, and there was one on the main campus. So we hubbed kids, and that's what Russ talks about. And we had programs on the main campus, and we had shares. So we even had where we were sending kids over to Gloversville to grab some Project Lead the Way. Right, you can do that. That's itinerant teachers, right? BOCES can do all of these things, but what we would need to do is do it in response to an emergent need. That we have to be able to start to work with the districts to get a sense of what are their needs and build the programs in place. Do I think there are programs where students do move away from that identity of belonging to a particular district? I do, and I think we see that happening. But we're currently providing all 3 of these things. These 3 models that we're talking about, aside from the satellite schools, we currently provide a wide array, and they do exist across the state. I don't think, though, that in itself is a goal, but I do think what you're all describing aligns with that 3rd bullet. So I do wonder if we move in that direction. Chris?
We do satellite programs.
Oh, right, special ed.
We do them under the guise of special education, so that we have a model to do everything that's been mentioned.
Thank you for that, Chris. So what I would ask is, when we look at that, when we look at the priorities in the first column, we tried to pinpoint different ways that we help as a helping hand. Is there a sense that we have to change that priority we're recommending to the board to a different one, or change the wording of that one? Or is there a sense that that's the right direction to go in? And we have to be aware of all the different ways that could play out and how we might have to fundamentally change as a BOCES in order to meet that priority.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So this is going to be presented to the superintendent, right? They have.
I want to have, yeah. Yep.
So depending on their feedback, can this shift if we set this?
Yes, it could, right? So we're going to be having this conversation with the conversation that we're having in this room right now, I'm going to be having tomorrow with the cabinet to have the same kind of dialogue with them to say, we're thinking we need to lean on these areas. How do you think? What do you feel about it? And hear what they have to say. What's interesting though is the life to death scenario that Gary put together, because what I'm trying to do is kind of write that out and see if we add that up there, because I thought that was really interesting and it links in with so much that we're trying to do. That might be the better lean.
Didn't know if you were responding to that. Like, just
I'm holding down some quiet time here. So I think what I'm hearing is that I think there seems to be a willingness to continue to explore the priority in the third bullet of the first column. Yes, we're going to take that to the superintendents. In the second column, I heard a bid for another bullet with a different priority. And that was about that idea of being the connector and the communicator for agencies on behalf of children, maybe their social and emotional and academic needs, to help them transition from life through schools and into their future, something along that line. So I kind of like that idea. And we can bring that up with the superintendents tomorrow. And I think you'll find that interesting based on a conversation we're going to have. And then the third column, the idea of making that an internalized priority to work on internally, was there any thought about that?
Michelle would like to speak.
Go for it, Michelle.
I don't know how this works, if you can hear me or not. Anyway,
okay.
So I wanted to piggyback Anthony's statements in regards to that first column in the bullet there. My first reading on this was, there's nothing about finances or the cost sharing in that bullet. And, just with the needs of being fiscally responsible. And I'm not just saying throw it in there for padding. I really think people need to be reminded that BOCES, one of the uses of BOCES is to help districts be cost savings offerings. So I appreciate what Anthony said, and I agree with that. And I too would like to see something financial, put in the bullet. And then as far as the third column, internally, I would like to see that, I'd like to see more on that internally.
Okay, you got cut off there a little bit. What did you think about the internally thing?
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think we should start with that internally before we can advise anyone else how to do that in their own districts, yeah. Right?
Okay, I would agree. Get it right first internally. Okay, so let's talk about, let's go back to that first column then. So what I'm hearing is that we don't really have agreement about prioritizing the needs of the component districts. Remember, we're going to do everything that's up there. But the idea of prioritizing is saying we're going to specifically lean and measure on one. We're going to focus on one, not saying we're not doing the rest. But what is the board going to call out and measure? So I think what I'm hearing is that there's maybe a bid that instead of calling out and measuring anticipating the needs of the districts, we lean on the curating, the cross-sharing. I want to kind of see if we can get to a priority, because when reviewing previous goals and our related service plan process, the goals are well written. They're very comprehensive. So what it allows us to do is to define everything a BOCES does, and we can continue to show you ways we do it, but it doesn't necessarily provide directionality. So, and that is good and appropriate at certain times. And at other times you want direction. When I look at the state of the state in terms of education and COVID and the needs and everything that's coming down to schools, I think we're going to have to look to try to make some movement, which is a little different than in the past. So with that idea of prioritizing, when we look at the three bullets, you can have a bid that, nope, there's a fourth bullet we really need to have instead. It could be like, this is like Gary did. He did the new bullet maneuver. There could be a new bullet maneuver in the left-hand column. There could be a nope, but we don't agree with where we need to lean, or it's no, we need to lean there, but maybe a little tweak. But we have to have that conversation because I'm hearing more than one person say that. So who wants to talk about that? So I'm hearing that maybe instead of looking on the needs of the component districts, maybe we move up it and continue to prioritize the cost sharing piece of this as what we really want to focus on and measure throughout the organization across the next 3 years.
So I don't think that we have to choose one or over the other, kind of is what you were saying previous, because we are going to work on all three of them at some point. But yep. I do think that we need to say we can't not be aware of why districts are coming to BOCES to begin with, because generally it's financial. It's itself and financial. We can't do it ourselves at our home district. Financially, we can do it better, or we can do it with BOCES. So
that's like our premise. It's the whole thing we're founded upon.
Yeah. So if I look back on this goal in 12 months and I say, what did we anticipate the component district being? One of them is going to be for sure their finances. I just don't want it to get lost that we build this great program that's going to build engineers for the next 5 years. No one can afford it.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. So it's going to be anticipating the needs of the component district so they may respond to the changing educational landscape and maybe add the sustainability language in there or something.
Yeah.
Being mindful of, right? Okay. I understand what you're saying now. Are there any other thoughts about that? Because we'll go to the superintendents tomorrow with the lean in the same place that we're thinking the lean is here, meaning putting weight upon or prioritizing the third bullet, but maybe we'll enter into that conversation, that cost cutting sustainability piece. Okay.
I agree with Michelle. I mean, that's how BOCES is help districts on cost savings and shift of faculty. So.
Okay, so I think we take the third bullet and we add some kind of, maybe some language from the top one above it or something that kind of says we're moving for emergent needs, but what we can't do is get crazy. Like it could be an emergent need, but it's got to be an emergent need based on the need for cost savings, right? It's the emergent need based on a need. It's the double need theory.
Who's emerging need?
Correct. Correct.
I mean, 2 districts could have an emerging need and to do something together with them that BOCES could run that would save them money and keep a program. Just maybe 2 districts or maybe 3, but it's got to be at least 2, right?
It has to be at least 2. It takes 2 to tango at a BOCES. Okay, so am I hearing any other opinions about the priority in the third column about inclusion? Are we good with the BOCES with the idea of focusing inward first? Was there any other thought on that? I'm not seeing any in the room. I'm checking. Okay, so we'll move there. The second one, the central connection one, I thought we had some great conversation. Is everyone all right with me rewording that third, the Gary Nelson proposal and putting that in there without the word deaf, no deaf? Okay, I'm seeing some head nodding. Tony Nicotero is smiling, so I'm guessing that's good for him.
Sure.
Gary Porcelli and Russ, I can't see you on the screen, and Mike Moore. Are you guys good with that idea?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and Mike, I can see you, and I got a thumbs up. All right, Yvonne, what about you? Are you good with me changing the bullet on the central connector idea?
Yes, I am.
All right, check it out. We got some progress here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourself a round of applause. Whoop, whoop. All right, so I'm going to go to the superintendents tomorrow. We'll be leaning on the third priority in the first column, adding about the cost and the shares. Second column, we're going to come up with the Gary Nelson proposal without the deaf. And the third column, we're going to run as it is. And we'll see where this goes with the superintendents. And then we'll report out on that at our next board meeting. So thank you for that work. And now moving on to the second thing, really had to do, it's just that continued conversation about the future of BOCES programming. There's two things we want to talk about. And one has to do with the community schools COSER, which is ironic because of what Gary Nelson had to share with us today. So Tom Dorr and I guess Chris, I'll talk to Tom, talk to Chris. Chris, go ahead.
Sure. So a couple years ago, we applied and received permission to run the community schools COSER here at BOCES. And we set up an agreement with the Kelberman Center to provide very specific services to districts in that COSER. Now, since then, a lot has happened, but one of the things that's happened across the state is this COSER is being approved for BOCES to be a conduit to a lot more agencies and types of services to districts. So I've been attending, and since Tom has come back, we've been involved in a lot of different meetings with a lot of different agencies and watching a lot of different presentations on all the ways that you can use this COSER. So some of those ways are like wraparound services, attendance support, truancy support, telehealth and telemedicine, school medical director. There's a number of different categories in which we are now, that the state is now approving, and we have actually applied for a number of different areas to start adding contracts to provide services to schools. And I'll let Tom take it from there.
Yeah, just as Chris said, the COSER was approved. It was approved as amended last week by SED, and all those things that Chris said are in there, including one thing he didn't mention: alcohol and substance abuse prevention. There's a whole wraparound stuff, and one of the main thrusts is to have this this base service that will probably involve a central outside agency that will interface with the schools, and schools child studies teams, those sorts of things, and try to, they'll have the ability more than the schools are to probably reach into the homes and help people with underlying issues that negatively affect educational performance. So that's what's called the Family Community Resource Hub, which is part of this and was approved. In addition to, again, a number of different things. So this COSER is you know, I was excited when I came back and saw that it was evolving. For those who've been here for a while, it basically is alignment OHM kind of coming alive. We could never really get it off the ground because it's historically BOCES has to employ everybody that gets aided. In this case, they have broadened that dramatically to allow for contracts to be aided. So we will have to spend quite a bit of time, you know, vetting the outside agencies as far as, you know, if they have a very specific service, it's one situation. But if they want to do this this hub service, we'll have to look at and see who might be the best provider. And it doesn't have to be one provider. You know, we can hold contracts that'll be approved by the cooperative board with a number of different agencies to provide these services. We'll give you a lot more detail going forward, but this is pretty exciting stuff. I know it's something that Russ Stewart tapped me on the shoulder a couple months ago, and he said, "Do you remember alignment OHM?" I said, "Well, yeah, I lived it for 5 years. I remember it." But it's pretty exciting stuff, and it could potentially deal with a lot of the things that Gary Nelson brought up, the peripheral stuff that gets in the way of education, and not trying to do it ourselves, but you know, enlisting the outside agencies that have different expertise than we do to address the family situations and to get these children the help they need to be ready to learn when they get here. So pretty exciting stuff. So we'll have more to come, unless there's any questions.
Any questions?
Just thank you for all your effort.
Yeah, the goal here is for us to be able to provide almost like an a la carte menu to districts, different services from different providers that we become the conduit for. So if you work with Center for Family Life and Recovery on drug and substance abuse, right, we can become a conduit for that. If you work with Connected Community Schools on wraparound services, we could become a conduit for that. if you work with truancy prevention with ICANN, we could become a conduit for that. So right now we're spending a lot of time figuring out what the next step. We have one organization targeted to get started with, and then we're going to look to build this a la carte menu, much of which districts are already doing. So a lot of this will be repackaged through us. So now there's, as Tom said, that aid coming back on it instead of just the, so we're looking to build that. We're going to have to get a system to vet the whole thing and make sure that it's all done with fidelity and properly. So we'll monitor that. But to be honest with you, I'm so happy for this conversation tonight because I didn't even think of alignment all the time we're doing this, that could be the framework for delivery here. So I think that's going to give us something to think about over the next couple of days.
And so Russ, did a lot of advocacy to try to bring regional attention to this and also to get BOCES to see if they could help with the COSR on that. So props to Russ. Thank you for your work as a cooperative board member to help us kind of see how these things might be possible. Tony.
I think that's a perfect example of what we just talked about for the last 45 minutes. Without a doubt.
How easy that was.
That's what we want to hear. That's what districts need to have happen. Thank you, Chris.
Yep. Absolutely. I think too, what's neat by moving this through BOCES, when you think of the multiple different agencies, whether it's social services or whether it's actual physical medical health needs, right, that can come together, there's a potential through the relationship building, right? If we can get good as the BOCES at reaching out to these agencies, developing the contracts, maintaining the relationships, then maybe we can get to a little bit of the letting go where people will be willing to say, yeah, there's no sense in this agency and us providing redundant services if we can work together. So there is a lot of potential in right now, a lot of need right now, but there's also potential for the future. So I think that is a good thing. And to Tony's point, we should have just started here, right, Tony? We would have we wouldn't have had to have all that discussion.
We found the outcome we wanted.
Absolutely, we found an outcome, so that's good news. The other piece of the future of BOCES, we had conversations with the superintendents, and typically we kind of go from board members to cabinet meetings, so that's good, board meetings to cabinet meetings. Was really looking at that thought of how do we know our BOCES programs are providing what we need them to provide? How are the superintendents part of a regular information about what we do and have an opportunity to engage in discussion as individual superintendents from their district's perspectives, which is the Tony Nicotera point, but also as a collective group so they can share their thoughts, wonderings, and possibly see potential shares across a room if they come together to have those discussions. So we've been having some conversations about that internally, and we're looking to see if we can do something where, and I'm proposing this tomorrow to the superintendent, so they might say, no, bad idea. So, let's hang in there. But an idea of having kind of like there used to be presentations to this board, like 4 different opportunities to have presentations to the superintendents about the programs and services and what we provide and what we do, but also where they would like to have some, contribution to the effectiveness or where things might have to go in the future with the program. So we think that might be the best way to do it. And we're also looking about, with division integration, Scott and Chris, then also going out to the districts, possibly up to twice a year to meet with the individual superintendents about BOCES programs and services in general. So they would have that independent point of view regarding what the different needs are, but also what future needs there might be or what people might want differently or better. So that's what we're proposing to the superintendents tomorrow. And that is it for the DS update. So,
well, I just want to say I'm a big advocate of that because myself, I'd go to district and try to do a report, but I don't have the knowledge that the staff has, and I would borrow, either Ken Ford or Howard or somebody to go out and try to explain, because the boards, the local boards, they rotate. They rotate right. Superintendents, they rotate principals, they rotate board members, and so you could go see them 3 years from now. It's a different crew. They may not know what we have to offer. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity for you guys to do road shows and go out there and explain all the good work we do.
All right. Any other thoughts?
we've done this in the past. One of these boards, they gave them a spiel on the budget or whatever it may be, or whatever they wanted from BOCES.
Okay.
And it always worked out fine.
So was that the boards? So that was when going to the actual boards of education? And was it the board's request for what they wanted to hear about?
Yeah, you just ask them.
Yeah.
Just tell them, just tell them, look, we're gonna come down, we'd like to talk to you. Do you have any specific information that you want from us? If not, we put up our own agenda. At the same time, though, make sure you got literature of BOCES, a little packet.
Yeah, so then they can have
What's
materials to
the
take with
question?
them. I like that. Thank you, John. Any other thoughts? Anyone? Okay. This girl's done.
All right, well, thank you. Back to the mic on. Thank you, Dr. Kilburn. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone who participated tonight. Very fruitful conversations. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. This is the good stuff. So now we're going to move on to number 8, which is I need a motion for the adoption of the Public Health Emergencies Communicable Disease Plan, a subset of the district-wide safety plan. So can I get a motion for that adoption? By Mr. Nelson, second by Mr. Nicotera, I think?
Sure.
Or Russ Stewart. Okay. One of those guys. And discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, fantastic. And then we move on to executive session. There is none tonight. And then is there any other action items, Dr. Kilburn? No. So now we're gonna need a motion for adjournment. Moved by Mr. Salerno.
Second.
Second by, I think, Russ. I can't tell sometimes. Okay, great. Have a great night. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Michelle, how do you
Good
feel?
night.
I have my stitches out. I'm well in recovery. Things not good. I still can't drive, so that's not good. But
Good to hear. Are you in therapy yet?
yeah. 3 times
Yeah.
a week, every other day.
Yeah.
So I think it helps.
It's going to help. Just stay with it. It's a long way back. You know